As the cameras kept rolling and the air in the chamber thickened with tension, it became clear that this wasn't going to fade away like just another political moment. Jasmine Crockett's challenge had struck a nerve, not only with Matt Gaetz, but with the entire framework of congressional responsibility. Her demand for clarity had opened a door that many wanted to keep shut. What happens when billions of taxpayer dollars vanish without proper accountability? What mechanisms are in place to ensure that questions aren't just asked, but answered? These weren't theoretical concerns, they were real, pressing, and deeply consequential. Crockett wasn't simply putting on a show, she was pointing to a fundamental failure in the system, and daring her colleagues, on both sides of the aisle, to confront it head-on. Outside the chamber, media outlets rushed to capture the firestorm. News alerts lit up phones. Social media boiled with hashtags and video clips. But amid the flurry of reactions, there was one constant theme. People were shocked, not just by the size of the missing money, but by the brazenness of how easily such a massive sum could disappear with so few real answers. In her follow-up statements to the press, Crockett remained steady. She emphasized that the real issue wasn't partisan. This is about governance. About the stewardship of the people's money, she said. If we can't trace $8 billion, then we're not doing our jobs. And if we're not doing our jobs, the people have every right to be furious. She spoke not just as a politician, but as a public servant. One who understood that behind every budget line was a life. Behind every dollar lost, a missed opportunity for a family, a community, a future. And as she faced the barrage of cameras and questions, she refused to let the conversation drift into the typical spin cycle of Washington. She brought it back again and again to the core concern: where is the money? Matt Gaetz, in contrast, issued a brief statement claiming that the hearing was a political attack and that the numbers were being misrepresented. But he offered little else. No breakdown, no alternative explanation, no audit trail. His team refused to provide detailed answers, citing ongoing investigations and bureaucratic delays. Yet for millions watching at home, it was hard not to draw their own conclusions. Because while the financial trail may have been complicated, the optics were not. One side demanded transparency. The other sidestepped it. Experts quickly weighed in. Financial analysts, policy advisors, former budget officials, many of them confirming that Crockett's concerns were legitimate. This isn't smoke without fire, one budget expert said on a national morning show. These gaps exist. The oversight hasn't been strong enough. And the fact that it took a single congresswoman's intense questioning to put this issue into the spotlight says a lot about where we are. In classrooms, debate forums, and kitchen tables across the country, the story sparked larger questions. How does a democratic system ensure accountability when even the most basic financial oversight can be shrugged off? What role should elected representatives play in demanding fiscal transparency? And more importantly, why does it so often take a confrontation to reveal what should have been clear from the start? Jasmine Crockett didn't come into Congress with the power of long tenure or massive committee assignments. But what she did bring was sharper, the conviction that public service means public responsibility. And in this case, that meant dragging the truth out into the light, even if others tried to keep it buried under spreadsheets and procedural red tape. The $8 billion wasn't abstract. It wasn't theoretical. It represented something real, funds that were supposed to go toward infrastructure improvements, community development projects, education grants, or veteran services. Somewhere along the line, those funds got lost, diverted, mishandled, and no one wanted to own it. The scandal, or misplacement, as some officials tried to downplay it, sparked a chain reaction. Within days, members of both parties began receiving pressure from their constituents to clarify their own positions. Where do you stand on the missing $8 billion? Why didn't you raise the issue earlier? What safeguards are being put in place now? Suddenly, what had been a singular moment in a single committee room turned into a national dialogue. Town halls began to fill. Reporters started digging through budget reports with renewed energy. Government watchdog organizations filed new requests under the Freedom of Information Act. Advocacy groups began demanding immediate audits and public disclosures. And through it all, Crockett's voice remained steady, even as the noise around her grew louder. She didn't seek to become the face of the investigation. But sometimes leadership doesn't ask for the spotlight, it earns it. And her insistence that the truth be faced, no matter how uncomfortable, had made her a beacon for those tired of business as usual. Still, there were consequences. Power doesn't let itself be questioned without pushback. Almost immediately, Crockett faced online attacks, right-wing media smears, and internal resistance from some within her own chamber who wanted the matter to quietly disappear. She was accused of grandstanding, of playing politics, of chasing headlines. But the facts continued to back her up. Every audit that followed confirmed at least one uncomfortable truth: the missing $8 billion was real. Whether through bureaucratic incompetence or deliberate obfuscation, it had slipped through the cracks of government oversight. In one report, a defense contractor had been overpaid by more than $600 million for unfulfilled equipment. In another, a health services grant had been redirected to private firms that had little to no accountability standards. In yet another, untraceable payments had been made from a discretionary fund that lacked proper documentation. This wasn't a one-time error. It was systemic rot, and Jasmine Crockett had forced it into the open. Other lawmakers, inspired or embarrassed into action, began issuing statements supporting full transparency. Some called for bipartisan oversight committees. Others introduced legislation aimed at improving budget traceability. But the truth is, none of it would have happened if Crockett hadn't spoken up, hadn't refused to be silenced by bureaucratic delay or political inconvenience. At a press conference weeks later, she stood behind a podium lined with folders again. More data, more reports, more uncomfortable facts. This time, though, she wasn't just questioning. She was leading. "We've got to fix this," she said. "Because this isn't just about money, it's about trust. And if the people can't trust us with their dollars, why should they trust us with anything else?" The response from the public was overwhelming. Emails, letters, and calls poured into her office. Not just from her district, but from across the country. Veterans, teachers, factory workers, parents, people who had grown cynical about Washington but saw in her something rare, an unwillingness to back down in the face of a system that often punishes honesty. And in their messages, a common thread: "Thank you for speaking up when it mattered." There are rare moments in politics when a single voice changes the conversation. Jasmine Crockett's confrontation wasn't just about Gaetz. It wasn't even just about the $8 billion. It was about the deeper question of whether America's government still works for its people, or only for itself. By the end of the congressional session, multiple investigations had been launched. Several contracts had been frozen. At least one federal official had resigned amid scrutiny. And the conversation, once buried in the fine print of financial reports, had become a headline across the nation. Through it all, Crockett kept doing the work, not basking in attention, but continuing to show up, ask hard questions, and refuse easy answers. Because when billions go missing, what's at stake isn't just money. It's integrity. It's belief. It's the thread that holds together a government of, by, and for the people. In confronting Matt Gaetz, Jasmine Crockett didn't just demand accountability. She reminded the nation what it looks like. Not a soundbite, not a viral clip, but real, sustained, principled leadership. And in that moment, when the room fell silent, when the question hung in the air, when no answer came, what echoed loudest was something even more powerful than outrage. It was hope. Hope that not everyone in Washington had forgotten who they work for. Hope that truth, even when buried under billions, can still rise. And hope that maybe, just maybe, if enough voices refused to stay quiet, $8 billion lost could lead to a democracy regained.